Bi-week Thursday edition of Birds 365. You got Mac and McMahon and McDonald. We are joined by John Stolnis, contributor for Bleeding Green Nation, host of the Eye on the Enemy Eagles podcast, getting in with us here on Birds 365. Johnny S., where were you watching Cowboys and Eagles this past Sunday? And were you biting on your fingernails when the Cowboys got it down to the 6-yard line with less than 30 seconds to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was down to the first knuckle. I'd gone past the fingernails at that point. I mean, because really, that game should have been salted away a couple of different times. And when they started, there was that pass interference call, you get them up to the 50-yard line. Oh, my goodness. You start to think this could really happen. And it just snowballed from there because they weren't able to stop them all day in the passing game. So, you gave them a little bit of life there, and it just goes to show you're never really out of it. And it was amazing they weren't able to punch it in once they got it down to the 6-yard line. Because I think everybody thought for sure the Cowboys were going to finish it off. But
I was getting ready for the collapse questions for the coaches and the players.
Yeah, it looked for sure like they were going to collapse.
Yeah, well, they couldn't cover CD Lamb all night, as you mentioned, John, and for some reason the Cowboys decided to go backwards from the 6-yard line. So I think a lot of it was the Cowboys shooting themselves in the foot, but I do give the Eagles credit. Mm-hmm. Man, they just find ways to win games. There's no tangible aspect to it, and I know that drives people crazy, but right. I always bring up Denny Green used to tell me winning is a habit. Winning has become a habit for this organization, this team. 27 consecutive weeks with the NFL's best record.
Yeah.
That's freaking amazing in the era of parity of the NFL. Your thoughts on just that sentiment? Winning's a habit, conversely, losing is a habit.
Imagine if they'd won the Super Bowl last year, how differently we're thinking about this team. Like we're using the word dynasty potential, talking about this team because it has a very Patriots-like feel to it. What the Eagles are doing right now, the way they really are the most talented team, it seems, in the NFL, and they even have holes. But when you watch other teams play on Sunday, there's so obviously a difference into how the Eagles handle adversity and how other teams handle adversity.
By the way, people should look at games this week. You don't have to watch the Eagles. Watch some other games.
Yeah.
And see how the other half lives.
It really is. I had to watch a Commanders-Falcons game. That was the game on in my area a couple of weeks ago. And it was a really tough watch. You just see because it's the coaching staff too. The coaches are making decisions that have no basis in reality. They're mind-blowing penalties and snaps not getting off in time and play calls where you just can't figure out what somebody was thinking. How did this guy get a coaching job? The quarterbacks are making mistakes left and right. It comes down to Nick Sirianni has a plan in place. He's hired competent coaches around him, and he's got a quarterback who just keeps getting better and better and better and seems to be able to elevate his game when he's playing from behind. It's really all that combination of things. And, I would say too, like even on Sunday, when the Eagles managed to hold on and win that game, there's specific reasons why. The defensive line, Brandon Graham talked about it after the game. They changed the way they were rushing Dak Prescott. They noticed that the tackle was shading too far to the outside all game. So they did a couple of inside rushes there on those last two possessions and got to Dak Prescott in big moments. It's little things like that where you have smart veteran players who are also helping young players get better, figuring out those little areas where you can have success, and it came through and helped them win on Sunday.
All right, one more Cowboy question before we move on and widen the lens. Where does the Cowboy mindset go from here? I've seen a couple national pundits, read a couple articles. Dak Prescott threw for almost 400 yards, blah, blah, blah. And somehow the Cowboy mindset was strengthened in a loss against Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Okay. See, there's your difference between the Eagles and everybody else. Eagles win and we go, yeah, but. Everybody else wins, we go, yeah, but.
Yeah.
Why? Is it just Dallas? Is it they are the national team and they get more attention and people are dying to see them return to prominence because 25 years without a Super Bowl, how prominent are you? Why do you think people are looking for ways and or excuses for the Dallas Cowboys after they come into Philadelphia and lose?
Yeah, I think with the Cowboys fans, it's coping. They realize that there is a gap, and maybe not even so much with talent, because the Cowboys and Eagles played a very even game for most of this game. The Cowboys defense did a good job shutting the Eagles offense down at the end. The passing game, Dak Prescott looked fantastic for 3.5 quarters, but Dak has trouble closing. And that's an important part of being a winning quarterback in the NFL in big games against good opponents, being able to close. That's the gap between him and Jalen Hurts right now. Jalen Hurts has the ability to close. He has the ability to play at his best football. And I realize he didn't play great in the last, let's say, 2 series of offense that they played on Sunday, because that first one of the three and outs, they were backed up at the 1 foot line. So you're just trying not to get a safety in that situation. So, really 2 drives where they went 3 and out, where you were hoping that they would take some time off the clock and get a few first downs. But Jalen Hurts is able to close games out most of the time. Dak Prescott has shown an inability to do that. And when you're talking about the Cowboys and national, the national figure, a lot of the national figures are Cowboys fans. You're probably talking about like Skip Bayless and a couple of those different guys trying to make excuses for why their team wasn't able to close the deal. It's a coping mechanism. But I agree with you. The NFL and national writers, they want the Cowboys to be an elite team. They want them in the Super Bowl again, because for years, for decades, the NFL was synonymous with America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, playoff success, Super Bowls. And I think for a lot of folks, especially older reporters, it is weird that the Cowboys have now gone 2 generations without being an elite franchise in the NFL.
Yeah, and I would say, and I don't know who Jody's talking about, because Tone DeShields, one of our producers, asked me that same thing the other day. And I said, well, I don't know who you're talking about, but if anybody's saying Dak Prescott played well because he threw for 400 yards, turn him off. I mean, the lack of situational awareness, that was the first thing that came out of that game.
Well, I'll give you, since you asked, a guy who's pretty well respected and isn't an old-time guy, Orlovsky on ESPN.
I typically like Dan, but yeah, that's nonsense. Now Dan's a quarterback, so
and I'm watching him on Monday, and he's going, Dak Prescott got past the hurdle that he can't get the job done. Excuse me, did you turn the game off with 2 minutes to go, Orlovsky?
I mean, it's fair to say Dak played really well on Sunday, and also that he couldn't close the deal, that he couldn't get the job done in the end. He did play great for 3.5 quarters, almost mistake-free football for 3.5 quarters. But then when they had the opportunity at the end of the game, the little things that you need to be able to do as a franchise quarterback to get your team over the finish line, Dak not only wasn't able to do them, he made decisions that hurt them. And that's been his MO throughout his career. And until he's able, that's the hurdle he needs to clear. We've seen him play well before.
He can throw for 400 yards. So I'm not impressed by that. I mean, don't get me wrong. And I talk about it all the time with Jody, higher volume throwers, that's a skill, and that's a diminishing skill because the league is changing. So look, he's got tremendous talent. I don't think anybody denies that. But the situational football, I go back to the playoff game when he's trying to spot the football in a hurry up situation, not allowing the referee to spot the football.
Yeah.
If I were a head coach in this league, John, and if anybody's hiring, put my name in the pool. But if I were a head coach, what would drive me crazy more than anything else is a veteran quarterback who doesn't understand game situations. And that's Dak Prescott. Delay of game in a must gotta have it situation for a veteran quarterback, and Lincoln Financial Field is not difficult for the quarterbacks. That play clock's right in front of your face. That's unacceptable for a veteran quarterback. Now, rookie, all right, there's some growing pains. He's been around for a while. That's the kind of stuff I'd be talking about if I were Dan. I know Dak Prescott can throw for 400 yards. I certainly know it when Eli Ricks is trying to cover CeeDee Lamb. I'm surprised he didn't get the 500.
Right.
But that doesn't impress me.
Yeah, and as I say,
Maybe
he's
it's
not
true.
helped by he hasn't been helped by his head coaching either the last few years with Garrett and now Mike McCarthy. McCarthy made some blunders late in that game too, where you could just tell that he's playing checkers. He's not thinking 3 moves ahead, 4 moves ahead. Well, what do we do if we're third and something here? What do we do if we're fourth and something? You know, having to burn way too much time in one of those earlier drives that left them with not enough time in that final drive. And Dak is a part of that. Dak could be, if he's more situationally aware, he can be more on top of those things and act as a second coach on the field and just say, I got this, you know, and run. And I think that's one of the areas where Jalen Hurts is really strong. I think Jalen has the game script and he knows what's coming up. He knows how much time there is left, what time they have to do things. There's a gap there between those two guys. And I think it's upstairs.
All right. Let's get to the Philadelphia Eagles at 8-1 and a bye week and the like. What do you think is most benefited by the Eagles for this 13, 15 day? Because they don't play till Monday night. I would love to know that they were out there getting some work in. We know that can't happen because of the CBA says you got to give them vacation. They get a vacation in the middle of the season. What is the place where the Philadelphia Eagles can benefit most having their bye week at this dead center middle of the season?
Yep. I think aside from injuries, which is obvious, I mean, you getting Jalen Hurts some rest on his knee bruise, and it'll be very interesting to see what he looks like coming out of the bye. Like if he's still limping around after the bye, then I think we're just having to be resigned to the fact that this is going to be a problem all year long. But hopefully the bye week allows the knee to heal a little bit and he can just get some treatment on it. But aside from the injuries, the guys who are banged up and getting them buffed up and healthy, for me, I think if you're looking offensively, I think they've got to figure out a way to get the running game going without Jalen Hurts being a primary rusher. They've got to figure out how to be maybe a more conventional running team, because especially inside the 20, that was one of the hallmarks last year of why they were so dangerous inside the red zone. They were able to run the ball inside the 20-yard line. And part of that was the Jalen Hurts RPO game. Defenses just didn't know whether it was going to be Hurts on a keeper, whether it was going to be handed off to Miles Sanders or Kenny Gainwell or whoever else they had back there. So they're missing that right now. And DeAndre Swift was piling up the yardage earlier in the season. That may have been when teams were still expecting Jalen Hurts to tuck it and run on occasion. You're also missing Cam Jurgens at right guard. It sounds like he's going to be ready to go after the bye week. So maybe that will help the running game as well. But there's been something missing there. DeAndre Swift has had some decent runs, but hasn't had a breakout game since then. The Eagles have been relying on the passing game, and it's worked, and that's to their credit, and that's great. But inside the red zone especially, if you can have the ability to run the football and get 5-6 yards a clip rather than 1 and 2 yards a clip, 2nd and 4 inside the red zone is a whole lot different than 2nd and 8. And it just opens you up to be able to do so many more things. And so I also think they need to figure out a way to get Rashad Penny into the game a little bit more. He had 2 carries last week. I thought he looked pretty good on both of those carries. And I'm still mystified as to why he's been in the doghouse during the first part of the season. And Kenny Gainwell has gotten so much run. There's obviously something there they don't like, but maybe figuring out, can Rashad Penny be a part of our running game moving forward? That's the area during the bye week I really think they need to take a look at in order to get themselves to be more efficient and more effective inside the red zone.
That's why John Stolnis is a smart man, Jody McDonald. I've been saying that. I'm surprised people don't see, and some do, you just did. The Eagles' running game is all about Jalen Hurts and all about the +1 threat of Jalen Hurts. And when it's not there, and it hasn't been there because of the knee injury, they find it very difficult to run the football traditionally. Now, then we can start talking about the potential solutions to that. But the negative side of that is, John, and I'll throw this out to you. What if their running backs just aren't that good? Because I'm teetering on that line.
Yeah,
I'm just saying they don't. Think of it this way.
Still number 3 in the NFL in rushing. How bad can he be if he's number 3 in the NFL? I know he did it early in the season when Jalen was there.
Exactly. Look at the numbers since Jalen hasn't been impactful on the running game. And by the way, it was a question. What if they aren't that good? And the standpoint of, if you think about how the Eagles build their team, they don't put assets in their team. So at running back. So if you follow the money, which generally works in every instance, they shouldn't be that good at running back. Am I on to something or am I on something, John Stolnis?
No, I mean, I think you're onto something. They thought that they could go cheap and that they could still find some value along the margins and having 3 or 4 different guys, different styles, and which is why the Rashad Penny benching has been so mystifying. Like he was going to be part of this supposed 3-headed or 4-headed monster, and I think DeAndre Swift was really hot in weeks 2 and 3, and certainly you're going to ride that horse as long as you can. But I think we saw this last year too, when Miles Sanders was essentially the lead back. When Gardner Minshew was in the game, teams didn't have to worry about the quarterback running with the football, and so they could key in on Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell. And so this is not a this year problem. This has been a problem the last couple of years whenever Jalen Hurts has been either out of the game or you could tell that his running was affected. So I think with Jeff Stoutland, I have confidence as the director of the running game that he can get some things figured out during this break and figure out a way. I do think DeAndre Swift is talented. I think Rashad Penny has some skills. I think he is talented. I think they have an ability to run the football. I just don't think they're scheming it up very well. And the offensive line should be healthy coming out of the bye week, and there really shouldn't be a whole lot of excuses. And here's the thing, too. If teams are stacking the box, then you got to go to the air. And if that's going to continue to be the case, you may just be banging your head against a brick wall for 3 quarters until maybe you wear some guys down and you can get some big runs in the 4th quarter. But I think it's an area they need to really commit to and see if they can figure out a way to make it work, especially inside the 20, because there's just less room to operate with the passing game inside the red zone.
All right, I'm going to give one of my famous hypotheticals here. The people on the stream love when I do this, as a matter of fact. Let's say the Philadelphia Eagles have the 45th pick in the draft this upcoming year. They've got the Saints 2nd round pick. The Saints are 4 and 5. They're in first place, but they're not great. They go around 500. The rest of they got about top half of the draft, just in the top 13, 14 pick in the second day, which would be 45, 46. If Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is still sitting there, and I think personally he's a first-round talent, but the league in general has de-emphasized linebackers, so maybe, just maybe, falls down to the middle of the 2nd round. With Nakobe Dean's injury, will the Eagles use a valuable asset like a mid to high 2nd round pick on a linebacker this offseason?
I would. I don't know if they will. It would be out of their character to do it, but I would, because I don't think you can trust Nakobe Dean. He hasn't looked good when he's been in there, and I know he's very athletic, and he makes some plays when he's rushing the quarterback, but he has been an absolute liability in pass coverage, and he can't stay healthy. If you can't stay healthy, I mean, he's going to have 2 years here where he's barely been on the field because of injuries and because of, as a rookie last year, he just wasn't going to get on very much anyway. But I think they need to. I think I've always said that they should invest more at linebacker. I hate this trolling for the veteran league minimum guys who get cut by other teams, and let's plug them in there and just kind of let them run around and try and clog up space. And hey, maybe they run into a tackle somewhere. I don't like that. I think the linebacker position, I give it more value than I think the Eagles do, and many other teams around the NFL do. But you see, when you have, for teams that have good linebackers, effective linebackers, they can do more things, especially with the emphasis with linebackers in the passing game now. If you can identify a guy in college who is really adept at that, that's something that they, I think, should target. Absolutely, I would go after Jeremiah Trotter Jr. if he's sitting there in the 2nd round. I think that's a perfectly reasonable place to take a linebacker in that spot.
Yeah, here's where I'm going to defend the Eagles a little bit, John, because and we used to, running back, linebacker, the 2 devalued positions. You're right. They take shots. The LJ Forts of the world don't work, but they kind of hit. I don't know if I'll call it a home run, but I'll say a solid double to the gap with TJ Edwards. And all of a sudden they have Nick Morrow, and for whatever reason, including the Eagles, by the way, Nick, if you're watching, the guys played well. I don't know why there's a debate of why he wasn't on the field versus Nakobe Dean. I've been saying that for weeks. At least wait for the crappy game before taking him off the field. Now they have to put him back on the field, so maybe it's a silver lining. And Zach Cunningham's played well. Zach Cunningham he was one of the best defensive players against the Cowboys. But I get it from the standpoint of when you see a linebacker, when you see Fred Warner, when you see Bobby Wagner in his prime, you go, boy, I'd like to have that player. But on the other hand, boy, I'd rather like to have the Eagles offensive line. if you gave me perfect example this draft, Jalen Carter, Bijan Robinson. I think if you looked at most of the fans, they want the skill position guy. Give me the skill position. Give me the explosive guy. Eagles correctly say, nope. I'm taking the defensive lineman. I'm taking the offensive lineman. They're right.
Yeah.
They're right. I'd rather have that Eagles defensive front than any linebacker in football. Anyone, pick them. And that's why they could persevere. They've used 8 different bodies in the slot, John.
Yeah.
If that happened in another place, you're talking about a 2-win team, maybe a 1-win team. They're 8-1, all because of that defensive front. So that's where I'll defend the Eagles. It might not be sexy, it might be boring, but when they show up, those defensive linemen, and forget about Jalen Carter because he's on another level. The Milton Williams of the world, just solid players, and they keep coming at you in waves and waves and waves. In a copycat league, why doesn't anybody copy the way the Eagles build this roster?
That's a great question, and you're right. It's along the lines, and that goes back to Andy Reid building along the lines, and that's something that the Eagles have always had as their
and you got to find
their
a quarterback, obviously.
Yeah, the quarterback is the most important thing, but they also believe in spending money at the cornerback position, especially the 2 outside corners, and I think they're going to have to invest in a slot corner this offseason. I don't think Avonte Maddox is not going to be the answer long term there, but
they already got him. Isaiah Rodgers, he's sitting there. He's suspended for gambling. I think he's going to be the slot corner.
Yeah. And so there you go. I mean, and so hopefully that answers those questions. And then you can kind of deal with the linebackers maybe not being totally upper crust. But if you've been investing in the defensive line and the offensive line through these last few drafts like they have, I think you can maybe sneak a 2nd-round pick on a linebacker. And, but maybe it turns out like Nakobe Dean. I mean, that's the other thing too. And we can't close the book on Dean. Obviously, he's still got a future in front of him. At the beginning of the season, we were calling him maybe the most important defensive player on the team because he was a young, he was a young player. They had the green dot on his helmet. He's going to quarterback the defense. He's this young linebacker, and he's been a non-factor, and it hasn't really hurt them all that much. But I guess I'm a little old school too. I like remembering like the Seth Joyners in the defensive middle of the field and what they could do, the versatility they brought defending the pass and rushing the quarterback. I like that. So,
all right, we dealt with one injury with the linebacker position. How are the Eagles going to do it going forward, both short term and long term? We're only worried about short term at the tight end this year. Dallas Goedert, no official stance yet. My guess is he's probably going IR. If he doesn't go IR, they get him back for that second Dallas game after at least 3 weeks out with the injury that he has. They're playing good teams between now and when they play Dallas again, a key juncture of the schedule. How are they going to replace Dallas Goedert? It may or may not be directly with a tight end. It'll be different formations. Will it change the overall philosophy? Forever, how long he's going to be out? How are the Eagles going to manage not having Dallas Green?
Yeah, I think this is where I hope getting Julio Jones a couple of weeks
ago.
Dallas
Green.
Dallas Green, baby. Hey, Dallas Green, man. That's John. We got John here. Yeah,
good dude, Dallas Green, but he's not Dallas Goedert. I apologize for that.
No, I know what you meant. And, I think that when getting Julio Jones a couple of weeks ago, maybe that helps to mitigate the loss of Dallas Goedert, because if you have Olamide Zaccheaus and Julio Jones, along with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, you've got potentially you can run more 4 wide receiver sets and maybe, you can have Olamide staying in a blocking situation every once in a while. You don't really want to do that. He's not a tight end, but certainly the guys that you have at tight end are not going to replace Dallas Goedert's production. I am intrigued by Albert, and you guys are going to have to help me with the pronunciation of his last name.
Just say
we're not going to
big Albert O.
Say Albert O.
Albert O.
Played enough to where I can learn it, John.
Right, exactly right. But I mean, in In 3 seasons in Denver, he caught 54 balls for 546 yards. I mean, he hauls in most of his targets. And now that's not elite production by any stretch of the imagination, but it does show that he doesn't have boxing gloves for hands. You know, he can catch a football, and maybe they start to work him into the offense a little bit in some spots here and there. But he's not going to be a 6-catch, 85-yard kind of guy, I don't think. So you're going to probably use Julio Jones, hopefully, a little bit more and use some more four wide receiver sets. Maybe you see more 2 running backs in the game. Maybe you see DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny in the game at the same time, or Swift and Gainwell in the game at the same time. Maybe you go more 12 personnel and run heavy with Jack Stoll and Calcaterra if he gets if his concussion protocol clears and he's able to play next in the next game. So there's different things they can do. They have a lot of talent. They have some different players. I personally would love to see Julio Jones step up and be a bigger part of the offense if he has that ability. We don't know if he has that ability right now, but I think it's intriguing what they can do with him in this offense and maybe continue to utilize the middle of the field with Julio Jones with Dallas Goedert on the shelf for a little while.
Yeah, Akwegbunam. That's how
there you go.
Pronounce. I have to look at it.
Akwegbunam.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can do it, but I have to be looking at it. By the way, Dallas Green, real quick. I used to work in a newsroom with a bunch of Phillies fans, and the easiest way, older school, obviously, you'll appreciate this, John. The easiest way to get them riled up was to say, former Yankees or former Mets manager Dallas Green. It would send them into it was phenomenal if you didn't say Dallas Green. Anyway.
You know, it's always startling when you watch the 93 Phillies video and they have those Mets highlights come on and you see Dallas Green in the Mets dugout as the manager for that season.
Former Mets manager lose their minds. Old school Phillies fans. Anyway. You mentioned Julio Jones. That's an interesting guy to me because obviously he's a Hall of Fame player, but at the tail end of his career. And I do think you have to have that third option. Nick talks all the time, and you mentioned it with the tight ends. The offense starts with AJ, Devontae, Dallas Goedert. Now you have to shift from Dallas Goedert. You mentioned all the ways they can do it, different personnel groupings. To me, the one guy that can make a difference, if he has something left, is Julio Jones. I mean, Olamide Zaccheaus, nice player. Grant Calcaterra, Alberto, we just talked about. These guys aren't difference makers. This guy at one time was in the conversation for being the best receiver in football. He made the great play in Washington. Do they have to get him more involved? Is that imperative? Or we saw it last year with Dallas Goedert. They played 5 games without Dallas Goedert. I think they won every single one of them.
5-0,
that? Yeah, we checked that. They won every single one of them, but they had to go about it a different way. And that brings us all the way back to the running game, more traditional aspect of it. All this stuff kind of marries together. Mm-hmm. What would be the simplest way? Because I think it's Julio. I think that's the simplest way.
If you look at the touchdown catch he made against Washington, it was a very tight end like reception. You know, they're in close. He just Jalen Hurts just fired the ball up in the air. Jones was in between 2 defenders, but he kind of went up, used his body, muscled, and brought it down. And that's kind of what you would like to see from your tight end, in close, in the middle of the field, get the ball inside the 20. I think that's where you're going to really see Julio Jones come to life if he's going to, because he doesn't have the breakaway speed that he once did. He's not really going to be a guy who's going to get deep on the outside. So he's going to have to work the middle of the field. I don't know how much of the playbook he knows. That's maybe one of the things that they'll be able to take advantage of during this bye week is really buffing up Julio and getting him immersed in the playbook and getting a package of plays together for him so that they can utilize his skill set, which I think now is his size and his sure hands. And so he knows he's a smart player. He knows where to sit down in the middle of his zone. He can probably break free of single coverage if it's, you know, man coverage against a safety or a linebacker. I think that's, or slot, even most slot corners, he's probably going to come out ahead in those matchups. Again, if he still has something left, we just don't know what he has left in the tank. But that catch against Washington was encouraging, I thought. And if he can do something like that, he only needs to help me 4 or 5 catches a game for 50, 60 yards. Maybe you sprinkle in a score here and there. If you can get that from Julio Jones, I think you can stem the loss of Dallas Goedert.
All right, need your insight on this because John and I have been talking about it for a couple of weeks now, and it just keeps getting put off and put off and put off, and we'll see if it's good to go by the time the Eagles come back. A key element. What was it you just said coming into the season? That Kobe Dean could be one of the key guys on the Eagle defense.
Maybe the key guy on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. A lot of people were saying that.
Right, and it just didn't play out that way. A key guy for the Eagles defense in the second half may very well be a guy who had 2 tackles in the first half of the year, and that would be Bradley Roby. Mm-hmm. That they're putting a whole lot of weight on what Bradley Roby can do when he comes back from injury. He's got 2 tackles in 2 games. And I know cornerback, you got to do more than tackle. But are the Eagles putting, and I know they have no other choice. I'm sure Howie's still scouring the waiver wire, but there just isn't gold to be found week 9 on the waiver wire. The trade deadline is come and gone. They putting a lot of eggs in Bradley Roby's basket. Mm-hmm. Is that by force, by choice? Something that's going to work out for him, or a basket that is just about to break?
I think what we've seen from this team is that, generally speaking, these kinds of Hail Marys that they like to do work out most of the time. And because he's got Darius Slay and James Bradbury, and I know James Bradbury looks like he's lost a step this year. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out, but he's still, I think, a good cornerback on the outside. He's got some backup there. I wish they had a little bit more at safety, looking for a little bit more from Bayard over the last half of the season. I think he looked pretty good in his first couple of games with the team. I think that they are putting a lot of their eggs in that basket, and it could very well end up breaking on them. And then you're looking at Eli Ricks and you're looking at Sidney Brown and just trying to muddle through the rest of the season. I was kind of surprised they didn't make an effort at the trade deadline and maybe they did, but they just couldn't find somebody to bring in to be maybe a better nickel corner. But every team needs nickel corners, right? I mean, there's not a lot. There's not a lot out there. And so if the guy that you have penciled in as your starter goes down with a season-ending injury, pretty much every team is going to struggle to fill that void. So I think they're doing the best they can. I think they got probably the best guy in there that was available to them. And it really is. They just got to hope that Roby is the answer there and that he can stay healthy for the rest of the season. If he's healthy, I think he'll provide more than Ricks or Brown has done for them so far. And I think that'll be enough as long as the pass rush continues to do what it's doing.
Yeah, it's kind of a low bar, but that's where I am, John, as well. He's going to be better than Sidney Brown and Eli Ricks and Mario Goodrich in the slot because he knows how to play the position. He knows he's a savvy player. He knows how to play the position. So maybe he doesn't have a ton left from a physical standpoint, but I got to believe that football IQ makes him at least a better option. And we'll see how that shakes out. But I do, also want to point out, people keep forgetting Zach McPherson. So, the Eagles not only lost Avonte Maddox, but they lost their backup as well in that position. And all of a sudden, then you're scrambling. But I do think they should have made a decision. And that's where I'll end it with you. At John Stolnis, make sure you follow John on X. Does a tremendous job covering the Eagles, Bleeding Green, the Phillies as well. Sean Desai, on one hand, I like that he's willing to try different things, throw some stuff against the wall, see what sticks. But at some point, you got to see what sticks. And I don't think it's helped Mario Goodrich. He's got to play Justin Jefferson. He fails. Big shocker. Taken off the field, then he's put back on the field against Cooper Kupp. I don't think that helped him. I don't think it helps mixing and matching Sidney Brown and Eli Ricks. So I like the difference, but at some point you got to make a decision, right?
Yeah, and I think the thing that they did at the end of the game, which is something I think they should do more, especially early in games when you see a receiver is burning you over the middle of the field. If Cooper Kupp or CD Lamb is lining up in the slot and they're destroying you for 150 yards receiving, put Darius Slay on the guy and just let Darius follow the guy around. And then you figure out who you're gonna, what you're gonna do with the lesser receivers, whether it's Eli Ricks on another guy on the outside or whatever it is. But like if why bash your head up against a wall for 3 quarters and then say to yourself, okay, we don't have a
and by the way, according to Slay, that was his idea.
It was
He's
his
the
idea.
one who said, all right, I'm gonna take CD. And I asked Nick about that on Monday, and he kind of had begged off because I'm like, at one point, it's great when you hear that and fans get really excited. Yeah, Slay wants to go get CD Lamb. But that affects everybody else. And that means the young undrafted rookie quarterbacks moving around and doing different things. And I'm like, what's that demarcation line where Sean Desai's got to make that decision? Darius Slay can't just say, bang, I'm going to take CD Lamb.
Yeah, no, that's true. And you have these guys practice at these different positions during the course of the week. You know, you have these guys working at slot, and that they're gonna work on slot and they're gonna play the slot guy. Well, if suddenly now you have Darius Slay on the slot and these guys are on the outside, it's different technique, it's different responsibilities on the field, especially in zone defenses. I get it. There is something to be said for making sure that your players are doing what they practiced all week. There's an argument to be made that you're gonna have more success that way. And in dire straits at the end of a game, you put your best guy on their best guy and just kind of line it up after that. And it worked.
Thanks for the Dallas Cowboys. So if it didn't work, it would be, I think, a much bigger story.
Oh, much bigger story. Yes. All right, Johnny. Yes. Let's leave on a positive note. Let's say the Eagles win their last 3 games, which are Giants, Cardinals, Giants.
Going out on a limb there.
Going way out on a limb there. They got 5 other games. They went 8-1 in the first half. Let's say they go 7-1 in the second half. At Kansas City, home Buffalo, home San Francisco, at Dallas, at Seattle. What's the most logical game they're going to lose? Assuming 7-1 in the second half, which game are they going to come up short in?
You know what? Boy, I would have to say probably in Dallas. That is a house of horrors for them. In recent, they have not won in Dallas in 2017. Since 2017, they get cracked at it year after year after year, and for whatever reason, they aren't able to get it done. It's really hard to sweep your division, and I don't see any way they lose to either of those 2 Giants games. So I think if you got to pinpoint a loss for me, it's going into Dallas, playing the Cowboys. Despite Dak Prescott's inability to close games, he plays really well against them in Dallas. He played great against them last year in Dallas, did everything he needed to do to win that game against Gardner Minshew. So that's probably the one I would pinpoint and say, if they're going to lose a game, if they are going to go, whatever it is, 7-1 during the last half of the
Eagles
season,
fans should take that. If you're giving me 7-1, Jody, I'm like,
even with a loss to Dallas, as Johnny Stolnis just laid out there.
Get me out of there with 1.
You should be quite happy, Eagle fans. We're always happy when John Stolnis says he can jump in with us. JS, thank you much for doing so today. We'll certainly get you on again in a couple of weeks, bud.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Bleeding Green Nation's own and his Eagle podcast, Eye on the Enemy, something you should check out. John Stolnis here with us on Birds 365. All right, hour down on a bye-week Thursday. McDonald and McMullen, a.k.a. Mac and Mac, here with you on Birds 365. Oh, we're going to make it Mac and Mac and Mac coming up in about 20 minutes from now. My other Mac partner, Glenn Macnell, host of the Eagle pregame show on Eagles Radio Network, is going to join us in about 20 here on Birds 365.